Um, I guess everyone is in right now. Yeah. Hello, everyone. I am Berna Köker-Poljak from Grief and Death platform. Today, I'm so thrilled to be introducing you to, again, one of my great heroes, Frank Ostaseski. Well, first of all, thank you so much for your time, Frank, for joining us today. I don't think you really need an introduction. You are known globally for your beautiful work about death and dying, and your very human voice.
Mm.
I feel like I know you, but I would like to share your short bio with our audiences first. Frank is an internationally respected Buddhist teacher and visionary co-founder of the Zen Hospice Project and founder of the Metta Institute. He has lectured at Harvard Medical School, the Mayo Clinic, leading corporations like Google and Apple, and teaches at major spiritual centers around the globe. Frank is a 2018 recipient of the prestigious Humanities Award from the American Academy of Hospice and Palliative Medicine. He has accompanied over 1,000 people through the dying process and trained thousands of healthcare clinicians and family caregivers around the world. His groundbreaking work has been honored by His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and he is the author of the 5 invitations discovering what death can teach us about living fully. As you know, Frank, we have dedicated our festival this year to the earthquake that thousands of people have lost their lives and homes and their roots. And more than 10 million people have been affected in 2 major earthquakes, which were very traumatic for many people. First of all, I would like to start by remembering and honoring all our losses here. So we are here to talk about grief today, and the name of your talk is Grief, A Path to Wholeness, a title that says a lot actually on its own. But okay, let me start with, how do you define grief, Frank?
Well, grief is the normal response to loss. And I'd say it another way, which is grief is the way we love people after they've died. Yeah. And sometimes our grief is a love that has no place to go. We could say this as well. Yeah.
It's actually, yeah, sometimes I think like grief is the subject misunderstood the most actually in our century. Because usually the one of the misunderstanding is that it comes only when someone dies. Only. But I guess it's more layered, right, than that. So
I think so. That's what I want to explore with everyone. Yes.
Yeah. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, of course, we normally think about grief as the grief associated with the death of someone we love. But also, there's many kinds of grief. You know, there's the grief of there's the loss of dreams, the loss of faith. These are all things that we grieve as well. Yeah. And there's a kind of ambiguous loss that happens sometimes when we feel this torment or we feel this frustration or confusion. We can't necessarily assign it to something special. Yeah. And so this is another way that we grieve, I think.
Yeah, that's so true. And I think some types of grief is very visceral, that comes from especially the childhood, the ones that it's very, I guess, hard to detect, I guess. So maybe my next question might be just how do we just identify, or how do we say that, yes, I lost something and this is my grief? There's a shame about it as well, you know, to just say that I'm grieving or something. How about the shame part?
Well,
and guilt part maybe about grief. Yeah.
I mean, of course, we have cultural and family and religious training or conditioning that sometimes lead us to the shame. Yeah. But I think, grief is a normal human experience. We are barely human if we don't grieve. Barely human. Yeah. So, one of the ways that we speak about this grief is to be careful of not assigning any kind of map to how we should move through grief. I think in our cultures, sometimes we are so uncomfortable with grief that we try to move people along through their grieving process too quickly. And that's what that is our fear of grief, our fear of the experience of grief. And so we look for maps, techniques, models that will help us move through our grief. But when we do this, sometimes, even if we are trying to be of some support, I think we do damage to the people who are grieving. So I don't like to use any maps. I think each of us grieve in our own way, and there's no one right way to grieve. There is only our way.
It's very personal, right? That's so right. Actually, I've been studying grief counseling as well. I gave a break, by the way, but just what I learned is that there are so many models, as you said, about just how to work with grief. But this is my observation that after 2000, I guess all the theories started dropping the maps slowly. Just there is no maps anymore, I guess, and I guess almost everyone now in the world coming to the approach that they say grief is very unique. Actually, we cannot map it out, we cannot limit it, and I guess you see many examples of with the patients and then the families of the patients while you were working with them, right?
Yes, absolutely. So while I don't think there is a model for moving people through their grief experience, I think when we do this, we can cause people unnecessary suffering. However, I do think that there are patterns to grief that we can recognize and acknowledge. For example, when we were at the Zen Hospice, we had a very simple way of speaking about the stages, we could say, of grief. But we didn't impose these on people. So we had a simple way. One, we called them loss, losing, and loosening. I think they're better in English. I don't know how to translate them into Turkish, but loss is that first period, and we feel the grief as visceral, like someone punched us in the belly and we can't catch our breath. And we don't want to accept the truth of the loss immediately. And so we can't believe that someone we love has died, or that we've lost something that's very dear to us, or that an earthquake has even happened. And so this isn't denial, it's just a kind of disbelief. And this disbelief can give way to guilt and regret. Sometimes when someone we love dies, we judge ourselves mercilessly. We say, I should have taken her to the hospital sooner, or I wish that I was there with him when he died. And it never ceases to amaze me how about our capacity to be cruel to each other and to ourselves when we most need our gentleness. In these times when we're most vulnerable, when we most need our kindness, we judge ourselves mercilessly. And if we were to listen to ourselves in those moments, we would certainly, I think, we would open our hearts to ourselves and embrace this pain. So I think in this period of loss, this immediate period, also we can get really angry. Our grief is not just sadness. I'm sure you've seen this with your patients. We get angry at everybody. We want to blame somebody, the doctors or the government or God. And it's especially confusing when our anger turns to the person who's died, because we want to also blame them for leaving us alone. Yeah. And all this happens in this experience of loneliness and confusion. Yeah. So there's this initial experience of loss, and then there's this experience of losing. When someone we love dies, we don't just lose them once, we lose them many times. You know, when we crawl into bed at night and our partner isn't there and we feel just the coldness of the sheets, we lose them again. Or if your wife was the one who did the banking and you have to go to the bank, you lose them again. So every time we have to do a task that our partner did, we lose them again. So we don't just lose them once, we lose them many, many times. Yeah.
That's so true. That's so true. Yeah, as you said, I guess it's not enough to remember that not only sadness is grief, as you said, like all kind of emotions are just on the table when we are going through the grieving process, like anger, sadness, guilt, shame, feeling hopeless, maybe sometimes, right?
Absolutely. And numbness, you know, where we feel like we're walking through a honey or something like this, or molasses or something like this, where we can't really embrace the liveliness that we had for ourselves. Yeah.
It's all natural. It's all natural, and it's all part of grief.
Exactly. It's all natural. Exactly. And then I want to just say one more thing about this. There's this third experience of grief, let's call it. And we, in English, we would call it loosening. Yeah. And it's this period where the knot of grief starts to become untied in a way. And this is a time for renewal. And we can't force this. We can't push ourselves toward this experience, but it happens. And let me give you a story. There was a woman that I knew. Her husband died. And they were married for 50 years. Yeah. So after her husband died, every night at the table, she made a place for him at the table. And she would sit at the dinner table, eat her dinner, and talk to him as if he were there. Yeah. And she kept this place at the table for him for about 6 months, every night making a place for him. And then after about 6 months, this loosening started to happen that I was describing. And she stopped making a place for him at the table. Often during that 6 months, she would ask his advice about things. And, you know, she would hear the answer back in as if it were happening in his voice. Yeah. But she said after about a year, she would continue to ask him for advice, but it would come back in her voice. And so she said to me, now I decide where we go on vacation. I bring him everywhere with me, but I decide where we go. And it was a kind of humorous way, but there's also relief that is part of grief. We think about sadness, anger, and numbness, but there's also a quality of relief. So, for example, when someone has been going through a very long illness, we might feel relief after they've died. It's another face of grief.
Yeah. I think it's also about time, right? If I understand those emotions might be very uncomfortable. So we just like quickly, we want to get over the other side, like, right? This is what we do usually. This is what I see. So, but also just the time kind of, I don't want to say it as a motto, but like time heals, or time gives it another way of seeing it. So I guess being impatient is also part of it, I guess.
I would add to that time alone doesn't heal.
Yeah.
The time is by itself is not enough. Time and attention, loving attention, that those two heal. So turning ourselves toward the experience of our grief, turning toward the suffering, is where we find the healing. And we want to go everywhere else. We want to look in every other direction, but actually it's turning toward the suffering, turning in. That is where we find the healing. Yeah.
You made a very valuable point about the loving attention.
Yeah.
Is it possible to talk about it more? Just loving attention or compassion, self-compassion, maybe.
Yeah.
I think it's a very important part of the grief journey. Can we talk about that more?
Yes, of course. I can maybe share with you a little bit about my own experience.
Yeah.
So working at the hospice, sometimes in 1 week in the hospice, we would have 20 or 30 people who died. And I would know them. And I got very close to some of them. And so I had a kind of my own deep grief when people would die. And so I did a few things. The first thing I did was go to my meditation cushion, because that's something in my life that's really helpful. It stabilizes me. It returns me to it allows me to have the capacity to be with difficult emotions. But the meditation was important, but it wasn't enough. So I would go every week to a body worker. Yeah. And he didn't do any new age stuff on me. Yeah. No California woo-woo stuff. Yeah. He'd say, "Where today, Frank?" And I'd say, "Oh, just here." And he'd put his hand on my shoulder and he'd leave it there for a whole hour. And I would cry and cry on the table. And there was something about putting his hand on my body, and also the relationship that I had with him, that was very helpful in my grief. And so one of the things I want to say about this is that grief is also a physical experience. It's not just a mental experience, not just an emotional experience. It's physical. And so sometimes we need attention to the physical more than we need attention to the mental or the emotional. Yeah. But then I also did, all right, but then I did a third thing. Yeah. And then I want to talk to you about it. I would go to the hospital where I knew the nurses, and I would go to the maternity ward, where new babies were being born. And there were babies that were born to addicted mothers, to mothers who were addicted to alcohol or to crack cocaine. Yeah. And these little babies, they would just shake and shake and shake and tremble and cry and cry and cry. And I would ask the nurses to give me one of the babies to hold.
Oh, that's amazing.
So I would hold these babies and I would rock them and I would stroke their throats and stroke their bellies, because they couldn't take in any nutrition. But then we noticed after I did this for an hour or more, then they could take in some nutrition. Now, I was working every day with dying people, but sometimes the adults that I was taking care of, who were dying of AIDS or cancer, I couldn't really soothe them sometimes. I just couldn't. It wasn't possible. But these babies I could soothe. Yeah. And so I would spend an hour with them in a rocking chair, stroking their throats, stroking their bellies, and then give them back to the nurses so the nurses could feed them. And then I would go home to my own 4 children and take care of them. So there was something about these 3 things: going to my meditation cushion, the physical support of massage, and the third was a loving service. And this last action, it was really important to me that I could soothe these people, these babies, that I could relax their suffering. Yeah. So one thing about compassion is we extend it to others, but when we do, it also spills over onto us. Yeah.
That's so true. That's
so
true.
Like this, a few years ago, I had some serious strokes. I had 5 strokes. And at night, when I would go to sleep, I was very frightened, actually, and very upset, and I couldn't fall asleep. And so I would lay in bed, and I would try to imagine all the people that were alone in bed and in pain or feeling grief. And I remember in February thinking about the people in Turkey and the tremendous suffering that they'd experienced because of the earthquakes. And so what would happen is my innate compassion would open and my heart would open and it would spill over onto the people in Turkey and all over the world. And as it did, it came to include me too. And that's how I would go to sleep every night, sending my compassion to others, but also feeling it as self-compassion as well. Yeah. And then in the morning, I would wake up, and before getting out of bed, I would ask the question, love what would you have me do today? And then I would ask love to be my guide for the day, to show me how I could be of some service in the world. Yeah. And so these two things, going to sleep at night with compassion, waking up in the morning with love, those were the two things that gave me a kind of balance and allowed me to meet the enormous suffering of our world. Yeah.
So you start the day and you end the day with an intention, as far as I see. Just you say the love, you remind yourself the
Yes.
capacity of love that you have, and you awaken it. Oh, thank you so much for reminding it to us as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. And I don't know, sometimes I try to imagine the people having going through in the east of the country because of the earthquakes. They lost everything, basically.
Yes.
They lost everything. So where do you go from there? Just how do you continue from there? It's hard to imagine for my just human capacity. But also, I think it is important to open space for the grief, right? Just to
Yes.
open space and remember the lost lives, the lost memories, and everything. This is what we are trying to do here, actually, as a platform, to open space for it. And I have two questions. One is about your Zen Hospice Project, because I know it's always in my heart when I read the story of your Zen Hospice Project years ago. It really touched my heart, and I would like our audiences to hear that. And also, there's like, I'm sure just you work with the people in the grief journey. And as you said, just listening them and just opening the space for the grief also itself is healing as well. Just to do that.
Yes, of course. Because when we do that, when we listen generously to the other person, when we listen in, I want to call it a devout way. Yeah. And what I mean by that is completely available, completely present for the other person. What that does is it helps them to discover the truth of grief, the truth of their losses, etc. And it brings that into the light of day, we could say. Yeah. And then it becomes workable. Yeah. We try to keep our grief hidden. And as you said earlier, sometimes we're ashamed of it. Yeah. But we are not victims. We can calm ourselves in our grief. We can come into the present. And when someone listens to us, it helps us to come into the present. We can resource our innate compassion that we were just talking about. And it can help us to make wise choices. Yeah. We can share the grief of others. We can understand that this grief is not just ours alone, that it's something that we can share with others. Not in comparison, though. Grief is my friend says, it's a no judgment zone. Yeah. The no judgment zone. So it doesn't help. It doesn't help to judge ourselves or others. It helps us, I think, to understand that vulnerability is not weakness. That vulnerability takes courage, actually. Yeah. When I think of vulnerability, I think it's one of the most beautiful human qualities, because what it can do, it's a kind of porousness. Yeah. And what it does is it lets in the beauty and also the horror of the world, and we let it touch our souls in a way. And so that vulnerability makes us completely human. What we tend to do is build armoring around our hearts. We create a steel cage around our hearts. And when that happens, no gentleness can get in, no tenderness can get in. We're temporarily protected, but we're not, we're still frightened behind this armoring. Yeah. So what vulnerability does is it lets not only the suffering in, but it lets the love in, it lets the tenderness. Yeah.
I guess this is the connection between just like life and grief, I guess, right? When you really just express your grief, also the life comes in, or just a deeper connections just comes in. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Because it
Beautifully.
doesn't
Beautiful,
block you.
beautifully said. So what's your experience in the patients that you've worked with in terms of what you just said, how the life enters again when they let the grief? What's your experience?
Oh, I volunteer in the palliative care as well in Australia. Actually, I live in Australia, but I'm visiting Turkey. It's my home country.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And it's a 20-bed capacity palliative care unit. And what I see is as people are approaching to death, they avoid talking about it. Actually, this is what mainly I experience. And as they avoid talking it, so they also block expressing their grief as well.
Yeah.
Especially, the grief starts way earlier than the death. We always think that the people should die and then I should start my grieving, but it's not that way. The grief starts very earlier stage actually. But as they block the reality, as they cannot say I'm dying, or they cannot express their grief as well. This is what I see as well. Especially in my own country as well, in Turkey. I'm talking about mainly the city life as well. I'm sure in some small towns, small villages, there are whole other traditions. They are free to express it. But mainly in the city life, in 21st century, it's not easy to be, how can I say, fragile, as you said, showing your vulnerability, because the whole sense of like I need to be strong, I guess, and also like I need to be happy or comfortable all the time. That doesn't really go well with the sad sides of the life, right?
Right.
It's not. It's uncomfortable because. So this is my experience, unfortunately.
Yeah, and the thing is, it's not the truth of reality. The truth of reality is that we are tangled up in each other. We are all connected in some way with each other. So it's also true that when someone else experiences a loss, in some way we experience a loss because we're made of the same fabric. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree.
And so this vulnerability, I want to speak about this some more with you. It introduces us to a kind of humility, actually. Yeah. And this humility is a gateway, we could say, to not knowing. Sometimes we are so filled with knowing that there's no room for anything else to enter. And so not knowing becomes, it's a quality of mind that isn't ignorance. It's a quality of mind that is wanting to discover. It's a quality of mind that has some wonder in it or curiosity in it. Yeah. And that's actually what enables us to heal, this process of discovery. Yeah. That's what allows us to move from this sense of isolation and fragmentation toward a kind of wholeness. Yeah. That's innately there for us. Yeah, so I want to talk more about this. When you were saying that people don't want to talk about their dying. And I disagree. Okay. I understand that it's your experience, and I believe you. It's also my experience with most people. But I think there's a sense in them deeper that is hungry to talk about it, but they don't know how to talk about it. And so they avoid it. And that's what you're describing beautifully. People avoid talking about it. But when there's someone like you who's willing to talk about it, who isn't so afraid to talk about it, well, then oftentimes people will come forward. And so that takes us back to the listening we were speaking about earlier, the generous listening. Yeah. That when someone senses that you're not so afraid, then it provides them with the courage to not be so afraid themselves. Yeah. So, for example, I always ask people, what do you think is going to happen after you die? And I don't have the correct answer for that. I don't think there is a right answer. But every person has a story about it. Everyone has an idea about what happens after you die. And so it's important to discover what that idea is, because that idea is shaping the way in which they die. And I think also shaping the way in which they live. So for some people, they have and I hope that they will be reunited with everyone who's died before. Yeah. But I want to share with you a story about that, because there was a woman I worked with, and she was a very faithful Christian. Yeah.
Yeah.
She prayed every day. She was had a great love of God. And her granddaughter came to visit her. And her granddaughter said, "Grandma, you don't have to worry. When you die, everybody who's died before you will be there to meet you. So don't worry. Don't be upset. It will be okay." And Grandma became terrified. Yeah. Because what she hadn't told her family, but she told to me, was that her husband had been beating her for most of her life. And he had died 5 years ago. And so the idea of spending eternity with him was terrifying to her. Yeah. So this is why I'm really careful to ask the question, but not impose an answer. Because I don't know really what's true in this person's life. We have to discover it, not impose it. Yeah. There was another man I worked with. He was the head of the California Atheist Association. So he had no faith.
Okay.
And I asked him, "What do you think happens when you die?" And he said, "Nothing." I said, "Nothing?" He said, "Nothing happens." And I said, "Well, is this nothing like the dial tone you hear on the telephone? Is it like that?" And because I get curious and I get playful. And he said, "No, it's not like a dial tone. You can't hear anything." And I said, "Oh, well, can you smell something?" And I just play like this with people. And he said, "No, you don't have a nose. You can't smell anything." I said, "Oh." I said, "Nothing. What's nothing like?" Because I'm genuinely interested in what people believe, because it's shaping the way in which they die. And then he said to me, "It's nothing." He said, "It's like your little molecules, and then the molecules mix with all the other molecules in the universe. And so you just become part of everything else." And I thought, oh, he's going to be okay. He's going to be okay. So I don't impose any ideas. I discover people.
My first experience with the patient was very funny, actually. I would like to share it as well. Oh gosh, that I got all the trainings, and then the hospital gave the orientation and everything. I was thinking I'm ready. And it was my first patient. And he said he's really scared. He's real scared of dying. And I couldn't stay with him, his fear. Oh, it was me. It was not him. He was very honest, very lovely guy. And I started talking about like reincarnation, imposing. I started imposing because I couldn't stay with his fear. So, and I always say, just my first patient really became my doula. Not me. He became my doula. So there's a story I always talk about. And also, like, what I say is that in my experience, Frank, my son has a neurological condition. And when that happened years ago, 17 years ago, we had to spend time in the hospitals and everything because it's a very rare condition. And I remember myself, I wasn't into grief and death and what I'm doing right now. I was in finance and I was heavily busy with the numbers, my career and everything. And I blocked myself as well, just showing my grief for years. Like I didn't talk it to anyone. I had a narrative that I was giving the same story to everyone, but it was very mechanical way, just what happened. But as soon as just like I started sharing it with my friends, with my community, I guess I started just healing myself as well. Maybe this is why I'm doing everything as well, I can say, because I'm still healing myself. So I give a great importance of listening to each other, not imposing, as you said. It's beautifully you said, just listening. Just sharing.
Open with an open mind. We say with a beginner's mind. A beginner, in the expert's mind, there are very few possibilities. But in the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities. So it's wonderful that these patients were kind enough to you to be doulas for you, to be.
No, he was very kind. Yeah.
Yeah, they're very kind.
Yeah.
So I probably, like you, I have many tools and many techniques that I've learned over the years. I say I have a whole big toolbox of tools. Yeah. But if I go into a room with someone who's dying or someone who's grieving, and I put this toolbox down between us, someone is sure to trip on it. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
The patient or me, I'm going to trip over my tools. So I don't lead with my tools. I lead with my humanity.
Oh.
Yeah. And then the other person can sense that I am just another human being like them. And that we can share human to human. Yeah. That I'm not the person coming in to fix everything. I'm not the riding in on the white horse, you know. I'm just another human like them. And I can share my failures and my mistakes as well as my successes. Yeah. And this makes me a trustworthy refuge to the other.
Definitely.
Yeah. And then when I'm a trustworthy refuge for them, they can discover something about themselves. Like, for example, when you are working with someone who's very weak and in bed, and you move them from the bed to a chair, you lend them the strength of your body, right? You give them the strength of your back and your arms and your legs. That's what nurses do. Yeah? But also we can lend people the stability of our minds. We can open our heart in such a way that it might cause them to open their hearts too. And this is what it's like just to be human with each other. We become a trustworthy refuge. And it causes the person to discover their own capacity to heal. And what I mean by heal is to become whole again. Yeah. I'm not fixing them then. They have something to contribute to their own healing. And so they become much more of a person than they were before. Before they saw themselves as a small, separate self. But now oftentimes they expand. They discover that they are more than this small, separate self they had believed themselves to be. And oftentimes this happens in the final months of life or the final weeks of life, or even in the final moment of life. And we might say too late. And I would agree. Don't wait until then. Yeah. But here's the thing that I've discovered, which is if it's possible then in the final month or the final moments of life, well, then it's possible now. And we don't need to wait until the time of our dying to discover the truth of that. We can discover it now. Yeah. So this is why I always say that dying has much to teach us about how to live our lives.
Yeah, that's a beautiful way of looking at it. Exactly. Yeah.
So
And also,
go ahead. No, what did you? I interrupted. I'm sorry.
No, please go ahead, please.
I wanted to also open up the dialogue to everybody who's on the Zoom call. So that if they have their own questions or comments that they want to make,
exactly,
they can raise their digital hand, and someone will call on them, and we can have a bit of a dialogue. Yeah.
Sure. Anyone wants to jump in? Anyone has a question?
It doesn't even have to be a question. It can just be
sharing, sharing, right? Yeah. Okay.
And it doesn't have to be profound. It can be very simple. It's just a process of inquiry with us, where we're discovering together, where we're doing what we were just talking about. Yeah. So what's on your hearts and minds as we've been talking about these words? How are they landing for you? Where are they landing? In your belly or in your heart or in your mind? What's your response to what we've been talking about? Yeah. So just raise your hand and then we'll have a chance to speak, okay? Well, it's a beautiful question. It's a beautiful question. And I hear that it comes really from your heart. You know, it's not just a desire to fix someone. In the culture that we live in, we sometimes want to push people past their grief because it's uncomfortable for us to be with their grieving. So when it comes from your heart, I know it sounds really simple, but just love them. Just love them, you know, and listen to their story many times. Ask them again about their loved one who has died. Sometimes we need to tell the story of the death 10,000 times. But what happens is our friends get tired of the story and they want us to move on, yeah? So if you can be a person who's willing to keep listening, to say, you know, I want to know how you are today. And I don't expect you to be happy or past your grief. I really want to know how you are today, yeah? And with that genuine interest, I think we help people a lot, yeah? So don't try to move them on. Don't try to get them to do it your way. Trust in their way, yeah? And support it and ask them, how's it working for you, your way, yeah? Oh, I still feel such a big loss. And then instead of giving them a new solution, you say, what do you feel? What's the loss you feel? In other words, inquire, be curious about their experience as opposed to trying to give them a solution. First of all, I want to thank you for your work. It's a beautiful work to do to help women give birth. And as a midwife or as a doula, what you do really is help the woman to trust herself. Yeah, that's much what you do, because you can't give birth for her. You can only help her to to discover what she already knows. Yeah. That she knows it's in her body, that's been there for millennium, yeah, passed from woman to woman, yeah. So that's the first thing you're doing, is you're helping her to trust herself, okay? And then it depends on when the loss happens. Is it a loss that happens in the first few months of pregnancy, or sometimes the loss happens at birth itself, yeah? If it happens at birth itself, I would encourage you to allow this woman to hold her baby, yeah, to caress her baby, yeah, even though she might be a little frightened, yeah. It can feel, what the trouble or the challenge with what you're describing is that the expectation is one of celebration, yeah. We all imagine, oh, it's going to be wonderful, new baby in the house, wonderful. And so it's not just the loss of the child, but the loss of the dream that's happening for this mother. Yeah. And again, you can't fix that all in that moment, but you can mention these things. You can name them, and that can be helpful. Yeah. To name the different types of grief that are occurring in that moment. That can be helpful. In terms of protecting yourself, I would be careful about that, because sometimes what we try to do then is we put on an image, you know, we put on a role, yeah, and then we think we have to be that role. And I think being real is the most important thing, yeah, being real. When I'm dying, in English we have the same word. When you have a job, it's called a role, and also when you eat a piece of bread, it's called a roll, yeah. And so when I'm dying, I don't want a roll next to my bed. I want a real human being next to me, yeah? Someone who I can trust. So you don't have to be a rock. You just have to be trustworthy. Yeah? So be careful of the idea that you have to be someone who isn't moved by this experience. I think it's okay if you cry with the mother, for example. Then it can be a shared grief. Then the grief isn't just hers alone. It's a grief that's shared with someone else, with you. Yeah? And yes, you have to take care of yourself. So when you go home at night, you have to share that story of what happened with someone so that you're not just carrying it by yourself. That's a way that you take care of yourself. But there's one last thing I want to add, okay? There's a difference between compassion, which we were talking about earlier, and taking care of our own distress. Sometimes, in order to take care of our own distress, we do something to the other person so that we can manage our own distress. Yeah? You following me?
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, doctors give more chemotherapy because it's too difficult for them to admit that the patient's dying of cancer. And so they're managing their own distress by doing something to the patient. Yeah? So compassion is other-focused. It's focused on relieving the suffering for the other person. Managing our self-distress is me-focused. It's about me doing something to the other person to manage my own discomfort. Yeah, and that's not helpful to anyone. Yeah. So learning to be a compassionate companion to the mother is really important, so that your attention is really focused on her suffering and relieving her suffering, not just managing your own distress. Because when you start to think about that, then you start thinking you have to be a rock. And a rock is not helpful at the time of a birth. We need softness. We need kindness. We need people who are able to share their vulnerability. Yeah. It doesn't mean you use the other person as your therapist or that you collapse completely in the situation, but you're human. That's what your job is, to stay human. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense to you?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Stay human, Pinar. Be the best Pinar you know how to be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, you have a special gift to offer here. And if you don't offer it, it will be lost. All right. I'm going on too long, but I want to express one more thing. And we're going to go over time.
Mm-hmm.
When we think of compassion, we could think of it as having two levels. We could think of absolute compassion or universal compassion. And we could think of relative compassion. So universal compassion is just already there in life. It's already pre-existing, let's call it, yeah? And relative, when we're just doing relative compassion, we can get exhausted. We can get tired. We can feel angry that people don't appreciate our good work, yeah? So absolute compassion needs relative compassion, yeah? But absolute compassion needs relative compassion in this way. The way that absolute compassion manifests in the world is through you, through your arms and legs, through your eyes and tongue, the way you speak, the way you look at a person, the way you hold a person. That's how absolute compassion manifests in the world. Yeah. And so if we don't allow it to manifest through us, it will be lost. And so you have to make contact with that absolute compassion and then see, how does it manifest through Pinar? Yeah. Yeah. I'll tell you a story, Pinar, okay? Stories are the best. They teach the best. So a friend of mine was teaching in Germany, and he was a Buddhist teacher, and he was teaching about a Buddhist kind of saint, we could say. And this saint is the saint of compassion. And this saint has 1,000 arms. The saint is called Avalokiteshvara. Yeah? And has 1,000 arms. And in each hand, she has either an eye to see the suffering of the world or an ear to hear the cries of the world. Yeah? So that's the image. Yeah? And in Buddhist tradition, she is the expression of absolute compassion. Yeah? So he was talking about this saint, and a man said, "That's very good. She has 1,000 arms, but I only have 2 arms. What should I do?" That's what you're asking. What should I do? I only 2 arms. And my friend said, "You're wrong." And he looked, he said, "No, just 2 arms. That's all I have." And he said, "No, you're wrong. And there were 500 people in the room listening to this exchange. And so he had everybody in the room raise their two hands. Yeah. And he said, you see, 1,000 arms. 1,000 arms. We are never just doing this by ourselves. We are always doing this with others. So let me ask everybody on this call to put to make sure you're on gallery view. Let's take out the spotlighting for a minute. And I want to see everybody on gallery view. And everybody put their hands up. Everybody, come on. Yeah, that's 1,000 arms, you see? We are the manifestation of compassion. This is how absolute compassion comes into the world. And if we don't do it in our own unique way, it doesn't live in the world. Yeah. Understand? So the way that you do it is going to be different than the way I do it. And that's beautiful. But you don't have to be a rock. You just have to be a compassionate heart. Okay? All right.
We are not going to let you go, Frank. This is
okay, good. I came because I wanted to be of support. So who else has a hand raised?
There is one question in the chat. Can I read it to
what
you?
is the question?
Yeah.
Sure.
It's from Burjo, and she is asking, if we practice grieving more, if we integrated grief into our life more through traditional or creative ways, how would a world like this be? Is it possible to dream of a world like that? What will have changed in the system, in your opinion?
Oh, that's a beautiful question. Yeah, beautiful question. Again, I would say we would become more human, because to grieve is to become human. Yeah. And then imagine we are more human. We are not so afraid of being human. Then what becomes possible? I think many things become possible. Then we're not trying to hide some part of ourselves or trying to be a rock. We're being human with each other. And imagine if we greeted each other on the street. You know, what happens now is, for example, your mother has died, and then you go to a party, right? And you go into the party, and no one mentions that your mother has died because they want to protect you or they don't want to upset you. Yeah. And what that does is it leaves you isolated and alone with this terrible suffering that you have, this grief that you have. And so I think it's important to acknowledge our own humanity with each other. And then I think many things are possible. I led a retreat in Auschwitz, in Birkenau, Auschwitz. I helped to lead a retreat there. And one of the things I learned was that the only thing that allowed Nazis to kill Jews was that they didn't see them as humans. They didn't believe they were humans. And so it allowed them to do these horrific things. And that's what happens in war. We don't see each other as human, and so it allows us to do horrific things to each other. So I think if we grieve, we become more human, and then anything's possible. So thank you for the question.
Thank you.
Do we have a couple more questions or comments? Anybody wants to raise your hand? First, I want to express my sorrow for the loss of your mother and father. Yeah. And I want to speak to your grief a little bit. Because when our mother and father die, we have nobody in front of us. We don't have a generation in front of us. And so in a way, we are orphans. Yeah. And it can cause us to feel fragile and cause us to sense our own mortality more than we did before. So first, I want to encourage you to be kind to yourself, okay? And then what you say is true, that when people have an opportunity to say goodbye, it can change the way their grief occurs. And even when people can touch the body of someone who has died, it can change their grief. Because the first experience of grief is that we don't believe it. And so when we have an opportunity to touch the body of someone who's died, it can help us believe that it's true. Yeah? And then it changes the way our grief occurs. Yeah. Sometimes it's more difficult for a man when his wife dies first, because he doesn't know how to navigate certain parts of his life experience. Yeah? The mother has been taking care of him all her life. Yeah? But he doesn't know what to do when he goes to the store. Like, I know a man, he was the head of a big company. Yeah? And he had lots of money, that wasn't the issue, but he couldn't make meals for himself at home. It's not that he wasn't capable, it's that he didn't know how to do it without his wife. And so he was eating tuna out of a can. Yeah. Yeah. So sometimes, even when people are very capable, they are so reliant on the person who's their partner that they don't know how to navigate the world. Yeah. Even if they are very good with everything else. Yeah. So this also could be another part of your father's grief. Yeah. And so you can help him by going to his house and teaching him simple things. To do the laundry, how to do the cooking, things like this. Maybe he needs help with these things. I don't know. But it's different. Men and women grieve differently. It's not better or worse. They just grieve differently. Yeah. And as you say, sometimes when there's the opportunity to say goodbye, it can sometimes ease the grief. It can make it easier. Yeah. But men and women cry differently. And some people will cry oceans of tears, and some won't cry at all. So we trust that if we are really attentive to them, if we show up with presence, if we listen generously, that's the major help we can provide. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you so much, Frank. Thank you.
Yeah.
We have like 7 minutes, 6 minutes or so.
Oh,
it's just time flew again.
I'm terrible with time. Thank you. Well, no, because I had some strokes. I had 5 strokes, and one of the places my brain was injured is the part of our brain we use to sort time, and mine doesn't work.
Oh, okay.
So I have three clocks in front of me, so it can tell me the time, but even then I forget.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us as well. Thank you. Thank you. Can we get maybe one more question if someone has a very short question?
Okay, may I ask you a question? Okay, why could you not tell him the truth? What was stopping you from telling him the truth? It's possible because we want to protect those we love, and sometimes we think we can do that best by not telling them the truth. It seems that you've learned a very valuable lesson. And I wouldn't concentrate on that you did it wrong. I don't think you did anything wrong. Huh? But now when you're speaking to your friends and they are dealing with their aging parents, you can share with them what you learned. And that's a great gift to bring to the world. That's a legacy that you have from your father's death that you can share with others. You didn't do anything wrong. You took those actions out of love.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes our actions are not as skillful as we want them to be.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but now you know, and now you can share it with your friends.
Okay. Thank you, Frank.
See, of course. Okay. So our time is coming to an end. Can I read a poem to close?
Sure, please. Yes.
And I think I gave this poem to the
translators.
interpreter.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Wait a minute. I have to find it on my computer. Hold on.
Okay.
No, that's not it. Where is it? Come on. Here it is. Okay. The poem is a difficult poem, but it's a truthful poem. Yeah? And it's called, hold on, I find it. One moment. Okay. And it's called The Thing Is. Okay? And that's an expression in English. We say, the thing is this. Yeah? So here's the poem. To love life, to love it even when you have no stomach for it, and everything you held dear crumbles like burnt paper in your hands, your throat filled with the silt of it. When grief sits with you, its tropical heat thickening the air, heavy as water, more fit for gills than for lungs. When grief weights you like your own flesh, only more of it, an obesity of grief, you think, how can a body withstand this? And then you hold life like a face between your palms, a plain face, no charming smile, no violet eyes, and you say, yes, I will take you. I will love you again.
Thank you so much, Frank.
Isn't that beautiful?
It's a beautiful poem. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
You take life in your hands. You say, I will love you again. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you for inviting me.
You have been wonderful, and it was a real pleasure to listen to. Big gratitude to you. Big.
Well,
thank you so much from Turkey, Frank. Thank you.
Thank you. And please know that my heart is with you, and that I keep Turkey in my practice, my daily spiritual practice, and also in my heart. So thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks. Bye-bye.